instant reaction going on here. I don't know that this would count technically as a Duval Dive live episode in particular, but one could argue it's about as close to a Victory Monday as the Jacksonville Jaguars have had in some time. Of course, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game of Fans First Sports Network. And listen, we're jumping in here because the events of the weekend in the playoffs have, in fact, affected the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, we have talked at length. Maybe you remember the episode from Friday where we had on News 4 Jax's Jamal St. Cyr talking about the coaching trip. Ben Johnson, Lions offensive coordinator, is a big name in the Jaguars coaching search. Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Lions, is big in the coaching search. And now they're very unexpectedly relieved of the rest of their season. But to get into some of these details, I wasn't planning to do all that alone. I have brought aboard my personal champion, my guy from Big Cat Country, Travis D. Holmes. What's going on, my man?
Hey, man, all the alarms went off last night, so we thought it was a good time to have this little emergency pod, man. What's going on? Good.
Yeah, for all the talk of Jaden Daniels and him having poise and you know, Man Campbell being a man and taking all the responsibility for his Lions. Listen, it's a funny thing. I mean, it was a good day in another way, too, in that the Texans lost, and they're all whining, like, you know, as if special teams wasn't a factor. It's all the officials, but I digress. Yeah. I don't want facts to get in the way of their narrative, Travis D. Holmes. But, see, you love it when I do that to you on Twitter, too. I don't want facts to get in the way of people's narratives, Travis. You need to stop that. But the fact of the case is now both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, and if you haven't checked out the episodes from Friday, please do so. Duval Dive YouTube channel, or of course on the podcast feed where we had some overtime action with Jamal St. Cyr. But
awesome time.
It was a good time. The main purpose being these guys are now available for in-person interview, mentioning Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. How big a deal is this really, though?
Oh, it's huge. Like I thought it was going to be huge beforehand because I was one of those weird people that actually thought that the Commanders had a chance of winning this game when I talked off that clip on multiple Facebook and Twitter groups. But no, I thought they had a chance. I didn't know it would go down in the exact same way that it went down, but kind of, yeah, sort of. I mean, I actually said at one point, I want to see a double overtime 46-40 game where Washington wins just so I feel good about Ben Johnson and also get this hiring search off, truly kicked off for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So personally, this is as close to a Victory Monday as we're going to get, but it's not really Victory Monday yet.
Sure. You got to hire the guy first. Yeah.
That's the other piece. You can still bungle this thing, and because Jaguars. So I'm not there yet, but
Yes, I don't know if he has the "This Team Makes Me Drink" shirt under the hoodie today or not, but those factors still do apply. And of course, I feel like at this point, Travis, you're going to owe, or the Duval Devout as a collective is going to owe Magic Johnson a Christmas card. His partial ownership, of course, of the Commanders there, the Washington football team, because this is the second candidate whose timetable was moved forward by way of the Commanders doing what they did. Now, granted, some of us picked the Commanders to beat the Buccaneers. The podcast. But Liam Coleman brought in the opportunity to be in the fold sooner, full tilt, because of his connection to the Buccaneers and being eliminated also by the Commanders. So it's just funny to see how much the Commanders have impacted things for the Duval Devout and the Jacksonville Jaguars out there. I plan to write something about it on Fans First Sports Network if I do something about that. But I mean, so but break it down for the people that may not understand how much of an impact that actually is. Like, what is it? Why is it a big deal to have somebody on the premises in person like that when Zoom calls are still a thing? Very much so.
I mean, Zoom calls can be a thing, and we've all. In the NFL, you're going to be working with people in person. You're going to be working very closely with these guys and building communication, building, familiarity with these guys. That is a normal part of the process. So you can get some of these things through Zoom. Sure, you can understand how a guy generally feels and how a guy would generally speak, but in person, you may have a situation where they're like, well, show me how you would speak to these guys. Give me a feel for how you would actually interact with these guys, what your route would be. And you will see how dominant or not dominant, they might own the room just from that perspective. Hey, are they able to truly instill confidence in this team, in the NFL guys, these men of men? Like how did you feel leading the room? Not just the basic things of do they know X's and O's? Because at this stage of the process, the vast majority, if not all of these guys, will be good, or maybe even to that elite level of knowing ball knowers, X's and O's. But
Right.
how can they own a room? How can they own a locker room? How can they sell me on that idea? Or maybe let's get into those details. Let's get into the real meat of what this plan would look like for your leadership of this team. Defensive coordinator, if you're an offensive head coach, or who's your offensive coordinator if you're a defensive head coach. Let's get into position coaches. Maybe we haven't talked in the greatest detail about those things. Let's get into that kind of thing, and let me put an apples to apples comparison against these other guys.
Yeah, I know. I mean, obviously that's a lot of it too, but I would be remiss if I didn't steal a point that you made a while back too, is that to a certain extent, the Jacksonville Jaguars themselves are getting interviewed by every candidate. Okay. Considering all the news that's broken about them, you got facilities, where there was like a health code thing with rats this time, last year-ish. That's all going on. What do you have often? Maybe they want to see the new training facility. I mean, it's relatively new. They had the first full training camp there, I think, this past season. So maybe a coaching candidate would want to see that. Maybe they would want to have that conversation with Shad Khan in his face and understand better what on earth you're doing keeping Trent Baalke like everybody else of us asks, right? You got to think coaching candidates would have these same questions. And I think just as big as the points you make, I might even argue bigger that the Jags in particular are compelled to open up the building and establish that trust, especially in Shad Khan's case with him, especially considering the Jags are set up the way they are in that the owner reports directly to the coach and the GM.
So that feels like something that you would do if you were self-aware. And that's something that seems like an assumption from my perspective, from you, Kyle Nash, or Kyle, student of the game Nash, that I'm not 100% sure that Shad Khan and or Trent Baalke have that same awareness.
That's
and I'm not
conversation though.
I know it is a separate conversation, but it's key to this point that I'm about to make. If the Jacksonville Jaguars are being interviewed by these candidates, yes. How much so also depends on the individual candidates, because if the Jacksonville Jaguars are being interviewed by Ben Johnson, I think that's a much more serious interview where Ben's interviewing the organization than if you're talking maybe someone like Aaron Glenn, who may not have as much pull, like most defensive coordinator, defensive minded head coaches generally just don't have as much pull as the offensive coaches. That's just how that kind of works in the NFL. Cool. And maybe even a Liam Cohen, who may be being hired right at that edge of being a little bit too early, so they might have a few less options, something along those lines. So I think that's more of a Ben Johnson conversation, where I don't see that Trent and Shad necessarily view themselves as this tainted or toxic kind of situation where they may want to provide that familiarity or provide that comfort to these general managers in selling themselves because they think that they're a king or a prime destination. And I'm not sure that they necessarily have that self-awareness to know that they are not, they should be selling themselves.
Right. You build on a point we've already made that Shad Khan made the statement, this is the best Jags team ever assembled. I get that. What I try to express is, regardless of the Jags thinking they're doing it, a candidate will ask for it. That's what I'm getting to. Now that's off the table and they can get them in the room. Listen, you ship the damn tickets, right? They got e-tickets, right? Like, I would hope that Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn's phones both went off from the Jags, sending them the tickets here to Florida afterwards. So I'll just stop on the way to Cancun, if you will, right?
Well, so Washington absolutely did us a favor, multiple favors, we'll say. I mean, if you're a fan of the Jacksonville Jaguars, like you said earlier, Magic Johnson, Dan Quinn, all of those guys, they deserve all the flowers and they deserve all the whatever you want to send them from Duval County, in celebration for allowing us to at least have some clarity on what's going on with the Jaguars head coaching search. So now that both the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Detroit Lions have been eliminated, then we can now generally say the rumored top of the list have been Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen, and maybe Aaron Glenn, and that's a maybe because again we've heard a little bit of Robert Saleh, but he could be hired as early as they get done with the Rooney Rule interview, so that's not really something that you're waiting on. But now that both of those teams are out of the playoff contention, we can now get some clarity. So because if they were to, let's say, interview Aaron Glenn on Monday or Tuesday, if they're not interviewing on the holiday, they could hire him immediately because that will wrap up all of the Rooney Rule interviews because they did interview Robert Saleh in person.
Yeah.
So that will be the second Rooney Rule interview that was done. They could, if he is the top of their list, on the off chance that is true, they could immediately hire him. Whereas if they were more interested in someone like Liam Cohen or Ben Johnson, they would still then need to complete that second Rooney Rule interview with whoever it may be in person. And then they would be able to, hire Ben or Liam or whoever that person may be, let's say Monday night, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever the day is that they have their next in-person interview. So that's kind of our timeline of what we're looking for. But we realistically should I say, you never know what can go wrong, but should have an answer this week, Duval County.
Yeah, no, that's again, if they're waiting for all the I's and T's, all the I's and B's, all the I's and T's crossed and dotted, so to speak, then they would still be waiting on another candidate potentially if they're serious about Kellen Moore with the Eagles. I don't think they are. I surely hope they're not, but that's a separate conversation. I had that conversation with the general himself, Mike Patton, on touring the AFC South. So, by the way, he still won't back me on Jarian, though, Travis. He's still got his guy Prince as a better football player. He's sticking to his guns.
Well, it depends on preferences, man. But that's the whole person. Because again, I love DeAndre Prince. I do. As an outside corner, I love it, and I love what I believe he's going to be once he develops. And I've said that since day one. So I love Jarian as an elite slot corner. And everyone keeps asking whether or not he should be moved to an outside corner. And I'm just like, no. Leave him in the slot. If he's elite, the same thing I said with Jamal St. Cyril in our overtime edition, podcast only edition of the Duval Dive. Please, look, all your podcatchers, find it. It's awesome. But yeah, I said the same thing to him. If you have an elite slot player, which I believe Jarian has that potential because he's already dang good, leave him in slot. Get you a guy outside, another guy outside, or figure out how you want to double the other outside corner and let Tyson play his thing. Do that. So I'm a fan of DeAndre Prince. If he develops into something, that's worth truly talking about, I think I'll be right in front of that line clapping because I do believe in them.
I mean, they absolutely need something with the DB core in the situation that they're currently in. There's no question.
So Robert in the comments,
but just all of that. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that on the future. I always want to ring the bell for that, just because I know it's going to come up in an episode. Of course, our friend Robert jumping in certainly has the vote of confidence. Con, we'll mess it up. Listen, we're not saying he's going to nail it. We're just telling you.
You're not wrong to be pessimistic, man. Because again, if you're anyone who likes good processes, fan. Me right here. Yep. I'm a process guy. I didn't love the way that the Jacksonville Jaguars got Brian Thomas Jr., but I was a fan of the fact that they got him. But again, I didn't like it because of the process. The whole Calvin Ridley situation, everything surrounding that, and then just to have to get into the draft, trade back, and hope that nobody picks him, and then you end up getting him. That's what I call luck in football terms. I call you bumbled or you twerked booty backwards into a good pick. But that's how that happened. That wasn't purposeful. It just happened that way. That's kind of the way I look at it. I'm a process guy. I feel like if you do things the right way, more often than not, good things will happen.
Well,
in this case, I think the Jaguars do things wrong as far as hiring in their hiring process and the lack of a clean sweep. So I believe that it's a lot harder to then get that right hire, that good combination of GM head coach, because you keep handcuffing them or shotgun marrying them to individuals who don't think the same as them, who are not in line as far as their philosophies are concerned. That's my issue with this.
Yeah, no, and no, we've discussed that a bit too. I mean, we've seen that most prevalent there in Tennessee. Again, propping up touring the AFC South. The general and I definitely talked about that a bit as well. Robert steps in. No outside opinion is what worries me. And see, that's a fascinating point because the very same thing you mentioned with Bulky twerking booty backwards into a good pick or whatever it was you said. Here's the thing. You have to be aware of the reputation of a draft prospect to have a good idea of where they might fall. It seemed to me, and this isn't me calling you out for getting it wrong because we all weren't as confident in Brian Thomas Jr. as we should have been. So let me start with that. But for him to be aware enough to be like, hey, I think BTJ is still going to be available down at 19 or 23, wherever the heck it was that they got picked. And having that awareness to know that that's the case falls into the same category to me to be able to look up and know what's around the room. But they don't have that. So it's a fascinating to me. And I know
that's not the way that they looked at it. And I say I'm not saying that specifically to Trent. I'm saying that's generally how most NFL general managers look at it. They don't look at it as this player will still be on the board when I'm picking in, 5 picks, 7 picks, whatever it is I have this group of 4 to 5 players that I'm fine with taking, and they'll be on the board. But some of those players, like, we don't know all the players that the Jacksonville Jaguars were interested in. We just know BTJ because that's who they got. But let's be clear, there's absolutely other players that they would have just been equally interested in that you are not talking about right now in Jacksonville because they are not doing very well, or they're not even on the field, or whatever it may be, that it absolutely could have gone with. And that's why I say, in part, there is some luck involved with that, because if they knew what Brian Thomas Jr. was going to be, there is 0% chance that they would have traded back. And that's kind of where I'm landing on that.
There is 0% chance, one might argue, that the Jags would have had a shot at him with the initial pick that they were lined
also
up.
Fair. So so that's all I'm saying when I say I'm a process guy. I am evaluating the process, but I'm not evaluating that process out of a vacuum. Like, I'm still looking at what happened around it to make sure we're on the same page. All that to be said, that the Jacksonville Jaguars had an open GM spot right now, this would be less of a conversation. If they truly do want Ben Johnson as their guy, well, the Raiders are interviewing former Lions executive and current Commanders assistant GM Lance Newmark.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a question I want to ask you directly that I saw out there on the socials, and I wish I remember who posted it. It was on our good friend Tony Wiggins, Locked On Jaguars, on his thread, and I didn't see who posed the initial question. He tagged you in it too, so maybe you saw this. But the question was, how can Shad interview a GM candidate when Bulky's still in the building? And I don't think there's a specific rule against it. It's just an awkward conversation.
I don't believe he is able to. To be clear, I would have to look up the specific NFL rule on it, but I don't believe that he can interview someone when there's someone else in the same role. It's no different than the Miami Dolphins losing that draft pick for tampering. I say tampering, for trying to interview, we'll call it, meet with Tom Brady, as an executive, if they have someone in that role, or as a quarterback, or tampering with Sean Payton when they have a head coach who is still under contract. Like, it's in that way, it's no different. If you have a general manager in-house, unless you've already previously decided and somewhere put it in writing that general manager is not actually your general manager anymore, and he's going to be in another role, and which still would have to be announced somewhere or posted or put somewhere, sent to the NFL in some way. I don't know how you can do it. So they can do their background investigation, sure. And that's what was already rumored, is they had been investigating Newmark, but they haven't actually interviewed someone. It kind of puts them behind the 8 ball, basically, so they can let it be known through all the backdoor channels. If this were a hypothetical situation, they could then put all those backdoor channel conversations out there with their camp and let Newmark know, hey, we are interested in you, and if we do hire this guy, then you would likely be who we go with, because wink, wink. This is kind of how this will have to go based on his agreement with us,
as it were.
Yeah. But we still have to do this interview process. So give us a few weeks or a few months. Maybe after the draft, we'll hire you in that role. And that's ugly. That's messy. That's very yeah, because you still got the Rooney Rule interviews to go through with the GM, and you're behind the 8 ball in every way. It's messy, because I hate messy processes. I don't like that. We've already talked about the fact that I need a clean process. If you have an open GM spot, this is easy. Just hire someone else and get your coach, and they're in lockstep. And this is no conversation. Now we're trying to figure out ways to get around the rules and kind of maybe we can make this work, or maybe we'll have the third or the fourth or the fifth guy down the line because we just don't have this spot open. It's just messy, man.
It's only messy because Shad refuses to rip the Band-Aid off. I'm just going to say that part of it. That I'll agree with you too, because like
I think that's clear.
Yeah, he's trying to have a foot on each side of the border there, so to speak. But something I want to. I'm on the East Bank. I'm on the West Bank. You know what I'm coming from. I want to address this real quick too. Robert puts in that BTJ was a Peterson pick. Just watch the video. Listen, I saw the video. I heard Peterson's voice. We're not saying that Bulky solely decided to get BTJ. What Travis is saying is there's a pool of players that Bulky and Peterson put together. The guy who said blah 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 whatever on the phone, sure. The part that's luck is the trade that was made, which I don't know how much Dougie P gets involved with that part of it, but the trade was made was with a certain handful. You said 4. I think that's a good number. We'll stick with that. But a certain handful of players they believed would be available at that pick, and they were going to pick the best of those. So
that's it. That's it. And at the end of the day, that's really all it comes down to. And because of that, I'm just like, all right, cool. I'm happy that it worked out, but I would really like to see better processes, both in draft, both in free agency, both with hiring of NFL coaches. That seems very important, and maybe even general managers. So an EVP would be nice. I know it's not going to happen because they would have already requested it from the NFL at this point.
Super late by now.
But here we are, and I'm hoping that it's not as a little bit less dysfunction moving forward. I'm hoping that Ben Johnson can be the Jacksonville Jaguars hire, or at least if not Ben, Liam Cohen, because again, I told you I'm really close with those two, and I've been clear on saying that. They keep saying I'm a Ben Johnson guy, and I'm like, I am, but I'm also not.
Guy. I listened to your appearance in T-Wigs on Locked On Jaguars. Okay, I saw what I thought, Travis Holmes.
Yes, but at the end of all of this, man, if we're going like. Shad Khan has consistently now over 3 hiring cycles said he wanted this to be a coach-centric team. I actually posted it on Travis D. Holmes on Twitter earlier this morning because I had to look up the exact quotes. We in 2021 we need to be a coach-centric team. 2022 it needs to be a coach-centric organization. 2024 this is a coach-centric league. We're here to support the coach's vision. Or are you ever, if this is a coach-centric thing, which means the coach is the boss, are you ever going to allow them to hire the coach?
Whoa.
I mean, this is a coach-centric league, but everything is being done from Shad, who don't know football. What are we doing? This is not coach-centric. This is owner-centric. And the teams with the worst owners seem to be the teams that's losing. And the teams with the best owners seem to be the ones that's winning. So maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars have an owner problem. And I know they can't make them sell the team, but I would really hope that they would get an EVP in here that knows the football game and that's able to kind of get this organization and this structure right. To help this process be a little bit smoother.
I mean, ownership being central to a team's success is not a new concept at all. And Robert's still going in. Bulky did demand Smith because of a lack of big men. How'd that work out? Listen, if you think we're supporting Trent Bulky on this podcast, partner, I would recommend you re-listen to a few things.
I mean, I think Smith was a fine pick, honestly. Like if you're comparing him against all the other rookies that we've seen across the NFL, I actually think the Jaguars PR posted that. I'm sorry, the Jaguars PR actually emailed that, and I actually posted some of those stats early this week, just to kind of a review of the rookie class. He was one of 4. Mason Smith was one of 4 rookies, NFL rookies this past season that had 3 or more sacks over the year, and he did that playing, under 55% of the snaps, and only playing in 11 games.
Yeah.
In comparison to the other rookies, he was actually, if you want to, take the math and figure out what that will look like with regular snaps over a whole season, he'd probably be top of the league as far as rookie defensive tackles. Like, I don't think that was a bad situation at all. And as for a 2nd round draft pick defensive tackle who's a rookie, nah, man, that's not bad.
Well, and I'll say this too. He did participate in the lighter part of the Jaguars schedule too. I think that's a factor, but nonetheless, considering how often he was a healthy scratch, for him to still come up with that is head scratching. I'll leave it at that. Listen, we could probably go another half hour. We ain't trying to do that. We're trying to give some people their Sunday back. We just wanted to react to, how the Washington Commanders have so openly impacted the Jaguars search here. And But yeah, with all that in mind, tell the world where you can be found, Travis, and what you're working on.
Yes, sir. Travis D. Holmes on all the socials, Blue Sky, X, Twitter, etc. All of them. Uh, BigCatCountry.com, as always. We are working. We actually are just wrapping up the head coach profiling. So if you have any questions on any of these head coaches, maybe you're kind of on the fence on which one you want to be your favorite one, take a look at the profiles. We have a deep dive dossier, whatever you want to call it, on each one of the top Jaguars candidates. Hey, if you have someone that you think maybe I'm kind of on the fence with this Liam Cohen guy, take a look at that article. Or maybe I think Ben Johnson's great. Well, let's look at his pros and cons. The article has that also. So definitely bigcatcountry.com. We also have our staff selections posted. Should be Monday worst, at worst case scenario, Tuesday this week, where we all kind of just tell you who our favorites are after doing this whole deep dive into all the coaches. Kind of give you our hierarchy there. So take a look. Save as your favorites. As always, we'll have you guys updated on everything that's going on Jacksonville Jaguars related. What about you, sir?
Of course, you can find me, Fans First Sports Network, doing all things Orlando Magic and Jacksonville Jaguars as well. Tonight, I will be at Kia Center, so make sure you check out my piece on how they do against the Denver Nuggets there as they host them here in Orlando. And, of course, I had written about the fact that this past Wednesday might be the most important pre-All-Star break game of the NBA season for the Orlando Magic. Well, I can tell you about how it went, but look for all that there, of course, on Fans First for the Orlando Magic and Jacksonville Jaguars coverage. I also was at Addition Financial Arena yesterday for UCF basketball. They had a doubleheader, men's and women's basketball. And, of course, as things continued to go for UCF football, with Scott Frost being back in the building, you can see my work there as well. blackandgoldbanner.com. Night Shift podcast there as well. I have the Student Game podcast. I'm going to be having some interesting reactions to the events of the weekend, also involving the national championship game where the Notre Dame Fighting Irish will do battle with the Ohio State Buckeyes and all the other stuff from the so much good football this week. Travis Holmes. I don't even know. It's it. Listen, here's all I can tell you. I won't I won't allow a long return on the opening kickoff, right, Texans fans? Oh, shut up.
I normally hate the Chiefs, getting these calls, but I seem to mind it a lot less when it happens against the Texans. It's weird how that works.
We'll leave that at that. So, for my good friend Travis D. Holmes, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. Thanks again for all the comments, and until next time, everyone, class dismissed.